Okay, so on this section of the Way of the Bodhisattva, we're looking at chapter 3, and this chapter 3 is called Transcending Hesitation. The subtitle is Commitment. This is a good one. I really enjoyed reading this. I read it over a couple of times this past week just to kind of get it in my head. And that's one way to study this. And I'll tell you, studying the words of an ancient text like this is practice. We can practice meditation on our own, and that's good. We can practice meditation with a group, and that's also good. And we can also read sutras and commentaries or the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings within Buddhism. We can read that also as part of our practice. And in some ways, it's not an extra practice. It really helps to change our mind when we start to study what the Buddha taught or how to go about practicing in our daily life. Because sometimes meditation is just not enough. It's not going to give us everything we need conceptually, because the teachings of the Buddha help to give us a conceptualization of how to practice in our everyday life using words. Whereas meditation is about letting go of the words, studying the sutras is using words, using language, developing our way of thinking and our way of speaking in the world, and then also considering or thinking about how to act in the world. So reading the sutras itself is a practice equal to meditation. So I want to make that clear up front. So she says in this chapter, Pema Chodron says that this chapter talks about the final four practices in laying the ground for what's called bodhicitta, laying the ground for the mind that seeks enlightenment. See, already we're talking, once we start using words, our mind gets oriented in a positive direction when we're talking about the Dharma or the teachings of the Buddha. When we start to apply words to practice, we're directing ourselves. Meditation practice, particularly Zazen, is non-directive, but we also need direction. We also need to have that direction. So this gives us direction. We need to let go of direction, and then we need the direction to redirect. So usually our direction is in unskillful ways, and it's in ways that create suffering in our life. So what Zazen practice does, and meditation in general does, it helps us to let go of the direction we're going in and to redirect ourselves. And then when we study the words of the Buddha, that gives us a new map of the territory that we've been engaged in. So this particular chapter, chapter 3, is about the final four practices in developing the mind of enlightenment. If you want to develop the mind of enlightenment, all of us want to develop the mind of enlightenment. You might think, oh, no, I don't know if I want to develop the mind of enlightenment. But that's our birthright. Our birthright actually is that each of us has the ability to be full-fledged Buddhas. In other words, we have the ability to see deeply, to understand the problems and sufferings in ourselves as well as in the world. We have the ability to figure things out skillfully in a way that doesn't create more suffering. That's all a Buddha is. And a Buddha is a human being, not a god. And we're all on the way. So the Bodhisattva, remember, the Bodhisattva is not a perfect Buddha. Bodhisattva is a Buddha in progress. And all of us are in progress. We're in process of Buddhahood. We're in that direction. Right? When it comes to our daily life, that's the direction the Bodhisattva orients towards, is Buddhahood. And each of us has the capacity to go in that direction. We just take small steps. And this is telling us these steps that we can take towards Buddhahood. Okay, so this particular chapter focuses on the last 4 of 7. The first one is rejoicing. The second of 4 is requesting the teachers to present the Dharma, and we'll get into each of these. The third one is asking them to remain with us. And the fourth one is dedicating the merit. So at the end of our meditation practice, we did that. We dedicated the merit just now. We may all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. And on your own, when you're practicing meditation on your own, it's a good idea to practice dedicating the merit. Just putting it out. What does that mean to dedicate the merit? We'll talk about that. All right. So those 4 things that this chapter covers. So I'm just looking at page 53. That's where I'm starting. Page 53 in The Way of the Bodhisattva, and No Time to Lose. She says in this third paragraph at the top, rejoicing generates goodwill. Right? Part of our meditation this evening was to develop joy or happiness. And it's not that you have to connect that happiness or joy to something particular in meditation. But if you start to begin to think about what are the things that I can rejoice for or be happy about. And she says, Pema Chodron writes, she says, the next time you go out in the world, you might try this practice, directing your attention to people in their cars, on the sidewalk, talking on their phones. Just wish them all to be happy. Right? That's a way to generate joy, to wish for the happiness of others. So she goes on there to talk about that. I want to go into the very first verse of this chapter, 3.1. This is on page 55. The verse reads, with joy I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings. I love this. With joy I celebrate. So very important part of our practice as Buddhists is the cultivation of joy. And how do we do that? How do we develop joy now? I said before, you don't have to connect joy with something in particular, but now this verse gives us some direction on how to cultivate joy or how to connect, how to make that joy more present in us. What do? Well, you can wish it. You could wish joy to others. Even if you don't feel it personally, you can wish for others to be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. You can wish for that for others. With joy I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings from the sorrows of the states of loss and places those who languish in the realms of bliss. Wow. Think about that way of thinking. So having joy in that virtue or that which relieves, there is the ability for all beings to be relieved of their suffering. What causes that? This is what we're focusing on. Like, what causes beings to be alleviated from their suffering? Right? We all have the ability to be alleviated from our suffering. In other words, if you're suffering, that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story. There is a way to end the suffering. And that's what the whole story is about. Like, how do we get to the end of that suffering? And one way to do that is to rejoice in the fact that you can end your suffering, right? And that there is the capacity for us to, not necessarily for us personally to go out and relieve everybody's individual suffering, but there is that potential there, right? 3.2, page 56, 3.2. And I rejoice in virtue that creates the cause of gaining the enlightened state. Right, again, so we all have the capacity to be enlightened. There is a cause to that. rejoicing in that cause. Right? There are certain causes and conditions that allow for the awakening of the human potential. To rejoice in those causes, right? This is how we awaken. This is how we lay the foundation for the desire for enlightenment, by cultivating the joy in the causes for that enlightenment. And celebrate the freedom won by living beings from the round of pain. Celebrate we all can understand the celebration of freedom. Hey, we're almost to the beginning of July, and here in the United States we celebrate the freedom of our country, right, on the 4th of July. So we understand celebration, freedom. This is not new for us. And to think about, I mean, even for our own country, if you think about our own country and how it came to be, and this kind of this freedom, this desire for freedom, and each of us came to this country. Our ancestors, unless you're a Native American, our ancestors came to this country because they were looking for freedom, right? And this is exactly what enlightenment is connected to. It's connected to freedom. The difference is, though, that the freedom that Buddhism talks about is not dependent on going to a particular physical location. If your ancestors were like mine, my Sicilian ancestors thought that the streets in the United States were paved with gold, and they thought, oh, there's an opportunity in this stuff. And I have an Irish ancestor who came for freedom from persecution. Right? That's the reason a lot of our ancestors came. It was the potato famine and persecution of the British. And then he went back. He went back to Ireland because he didn't find the conditions in the United States any better. But then he had to come back again because they were even worse in Ireland. So it changed over that period of time, going back and forth. So where is freedom? Freedom is not going to a particular physical location. It's not even going to a particular mental location. Right? Freedom is right now, right here, right now. We can open to freedom. What is that freedom? We're alive, right? We can breathe. We can breathe out. We can become conscious of being alive. Is that not freedom, that we're alive right now? Regardless of our conditions, right? We are alive. Our conditions.
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you said freedom is being alive. Then what happens when we're dead? What does that mean? I mean, I'm not asking you to tell me what happens, but does that mean we lose our freedom? That's my question.
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know. When we die, we can certainly mourn the loss of others, but even in our grief, and let me continue, because even in our grief, there is the possibility for freedom of mind.
I'm talking about the person who died, not the people who are left behind.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. I can't speak
okay.
for that. I only know that right now I'm alive. And I can't speak for when I'm dead because I'm not there yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. All right, 3.3. And in the Buddhahood of the protectors I delight, and in the stages of the Buddha's offspring. So what this is referring to is it's referring to arhats. Those are the ones that were enlightened in the were self-enlightened. All right. But I think we can think of this verse is to remember that the need for teachers. We've got to have teachers. If we're going to traverse the path of the Bodhisattva, then it's absolutely essential. Absolutely. I couldn't do any of this without teachers. My teachers guided me as much as they could. And it's because of their lives, because of the way that they lived, as well as what they said, that inspired me. And if I didn't have that, I couldn't speak a thing, I couldn't say a thing right now. It's absolutely, I had teachers all the way, not just my Buddhist teachers I had some of the best Buddhist teachers. My root teacher, Diane Banaj, amazing human being. And also teachers that I had in college that introduced me to the Dharma. I still go back to what they taught me and what they said and how they are living their lives today. That's an inspiration to me. And when you have a living teacher that is embodying they're not perfect, but when you have a living teacher, that's an inspiration. It tells us you can do it. I can do it, you can do it. If they can do it, then we can do it too. And we need to have those living examples. Thich Nhat Hanh is another living example. Well, now he's passed away, but when he was alive, just an amazing human being. And they remind us that you don't have to become a god. You don't have to be a god. All right? We can take refuge in teachers, even if they're not totally divine beings. We can take refuge in them because they've made steps and they've made some progress along the path of the Buddha. All right. So now this next verse, 3.4. The intention, ocean of great good, that seeks to place all beings in the state of bliss, and every action for the benefit of all. Such is my delight and all my joy. All right, so this one is wishing for the success of others. And yet, what we usually do in here's what we usually do when we're unconscious, our general habits, a way of thinking and being in the world with others, is one of competitiveness, jealousy and competitiveness. Those are really strong in our society and in our own minds. And this is a way to redirect that competitiveness, is changing the udder on your boat, on your vehicle towards Buddhahood. We're taking that udder and we're turning it so that we rejoice in the success of others. So Pema Chodron, she writes on the bottom of page 57, her last paragraph there, before the next verse, she writes, "The practice of rejoicing overcomes jealousy and competitiveness. This is accomplished by heightening our unbiased awareness of those very qualities we wish to deny." All right? So we all have this competitiveness and jealousy that works in an unconscious way oftentimes in us. And how do we address that jealousy and competitiveness that's really strong in us? Now, I was a competitive swimmer, so I was brought up learning how to compete with other people and not wishing them well. Right? But this is saying do something different. This is saying rejoice in their success. Does that mean you don't do your best? No, it doesn't mean that. All right, and then verse 3.5. I'm just going to go into this next page, and then we'll open for further comments, reflection, or further reading if you'd like to in these last 10 minutes. And so I join my hands and pray. The Buddhas who reside in every quarter, kindle now the Dharma's light for those who grope bewildered in the dark of suffering. All right, so this kind of generating merit. So these are these verses that we just went through are basically highlighting these 4 practices to transcend hesitation. What are the 4 again? Rejoicing, requesting the teachers to present the Dharma, so we've got to have teachers on this path, absolutely essential. In some form, we all have teachers. And you might take a moment even to think about who's inspired you. It could be somebody living, it could be somebody who's passed away, but that you've read about. It doesn't even have to be a human being, right? But something or someone that has inspired you. Requesting teachers to present the Dharma, asking them to remain with us. That's the third one. Asking the teachers to remain with us. Right? We don't want them to go. We want to keep them. And one way, even if they have gone, we can keep them alive by remembering what they taught and how they lived. Right? So that has to do with remembering, recall. Even if they've passed away, Thich Nhat Hanh, I consider him one of my teachers. Even though he's passed away, I can still derive inspiration from his teachings and his way of life. I can just thinking about him. And the fourth one, dedicating the merit. So this is the practice, and she says further in this text, you want to read it a little bit more on your own. The practice of giving merit or letting or of sending merit out is really at heart, at the base, is the practice of letting go. It's the fullness of letting go, the fullness of letting go of our own egos, of our attachments, of our anger, of our just letting it all go, right? Letting everything go. Okay, so here Shanti Deva, she says, this is page 58 at the top. She says, he presents the fifth of the sevenfold offerings, the practice of requesting teachers to clarify our understanding of the Dharma, asking the wise to illuminate our confusion overcomes wrong views, such as believing that people are basically bad or that karma is a punishment bestowed on us by our outer forces. That's confused thinking, she's saying. So actually, I actually am wrong on this. This isn't about giving merit. This is about requesting teachers to stay. This verse 3.5. I'm sorry, requesting teachers to clarify our understanding. That's why there are teachers, that's why there are Dharma teachers there to help us to clarify our own understanding, to help us to end confusion. Okay. Okay, so what I'd like us to do then is from here, I'm gonna end this recording, and then we can continue to talk about this more freely, more openly. I'll invite you to read the verses. If you have a copy of it, you can read the verse for us. We can talk about it, bring up any questions. Feel free to interrupt. You don't have to wait till the end. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody.